So you've got your licence, it's time to go fishing. First thing you need is some tackle, and the good news is that up and down the UK there's a lot of commercial fisheries with tackle shops like this one. Today you join me at one of my favourite commercial fisheries, Drennan Lindholme Lakes near Doncaster. And as you can see, they've got a wide range of tackle so you can get exactly what you need for a day's fishing. And most of all, at a price that won't break the bank. In a moment, I'll talk you through the exact tackle you need to get up and fishing on a venue like this. But first, one key piece of advice I'd give is don't be afraid to ask. Fishing tackle shops like this one are a mine of information, as well as giving you the best lakes to get on, the tackle you need and the tactics that are currently working at that specific venue. So first of all, let me talk about rods. If you go into the rods section of your shop, you'll probably be confronted with an array of different sizes, lengths and types which are all suited to do different specialist jobs. But for what I'm wanting to talk about today, which is general float fishing or coarse fishing, you'll need something known as a match rod, a waggler rod or a float rod, depending on how the companies label them up. These are all terms that mean pretty much the same thing. But the first thing to look for is in the tip section, you don't want either a hole, which will take a quiver tip if the rod's a feeder rod, or a coloured end section. They aren't float rods, they are feeder rods. So a float rod will have a nice plain black end on it. Second thing, there are different grades, different sizes of float rods. So certain rods are made, for example, for floater fishing or for fishing pellet waggler, and they have a thicker tip and a bit of a stronger action. For general coarse fishing, you probably want to avoid these. You want something a little bit lighter, which will allow you to do a variety of methods. And by the same token, anything that says fine or light is specifically designed for very light waggler fishing, so catching roach and rudd, that sort of thing. For your first rod, you probably want to avoid that end of the spectrum as well. So a nice multi-purpose match or waggler rod. I picked this one up for just under £30. It's 12 foot long and it can do a bit of everything, as we'll hopefully show you later today. Next up, reels. Again, most tackle shops stock an array of different sizes and they're all made for different purposes. There are some companies who label them up very clearly, which is most useful in this instance. This is a float fish reel made by Drennan for float fishing, and so absolutely perfect for what we want. Now generally the bigger reels that you see will be either for carp fishing or sea fishing or long distance feeder fishing, but for float fishing we're going to be covering today this sort of 3000 size reel as we call it, and that only relates to the size of the spool, is absolutely perfect. Now these are supplied often in a box, in a bag, I'm not sure what they're for, and they come with two spools. This is very useful because it allows you to have two different sizes of main line on these spools to allow you to do different jobs. Obviously for today we're focusing on general purpose float fishing, so we'll load this up with some line and I'll run you through that in a second. But the fact that it's got two spools with it allows you to maybe have some lighter line, such as what we might use today, and something a bit heavier if you did want to specifically target bigger fish. Again, selecting the right line for the job is very important. There are two key things you need to look for. One is the breaking strain, which is often measured in weight, and that'll be written on, so you can see here that's 4.4 pound. And the second is the amount of line that you get on the spool, because obviously that affects the value for money of what you're buying. Now, Drennan, very helpful, they've labelled this up clearly, float fish. We are float fishing, so it's perfect for what we want to do today. 4.4 pound. Now, that's misleading. A lot of people think that the fact that says 4.4 pound means that you can only catch fish up to 4 pound on it. That's not the case at all. I'm confident that if we hook fish to 10, 15, even 20 pound today on the lakes, we'd have a really good chance of landing them on this line. That's just the amount of pressure required to snap the line at a given time. But obviously you're never deadlifting the weight of fish that you're catching. So 4.4 pounds, a nice all-round general coarse fishing reel line. On to floats now. Two key things to mention here. First one, you need to be able to see it. It needs to be visible. And obviously the bristle or tip of the float is the thing that allows you to do that. So a nice float that you can see clearly. A lot of beginners make the mistake of shotting the float so they have this much or more out of the water. Big mistake. You'll miss a lot of bites doing that, as I'll explain when we get out on the bank later. So when you're fishing, you are only going to have around about that much of the float showing. So it needs to be thick enough for you to be able to see it. Secondly, weight. Now I know that the lakes here at Lindholme are only going to be around 4 or 5 foot deep where we're fishing today, so I don't need a massively heavy float to tackle them. This one is a 4 gram plus 4 number 4 weight puddle chucker. So that means it weighs about 4 grams and will take 4 number 4s of weight down the line, which will be enough to get our bait down to the bottom where the fish are going to eat it. Next up, shot. There are lots of different sizes and types available, from stops to shot, and basically all these things is a weight to help you either get your bait to the bottom or to shot your float to that optimum length of bristle that I mentioned earlier, so you've got just the right amount out of the water to see your bites. You can either buy them singly in packets. These are some waterline stick shot that we've got today in the number 4. Or you can buy them in dispensers that cover a range of sizes. Generally for coarse fishing, these will go from a SSG, which is often called a swan shot, down to a number 8. But what we've bought today are some number 4s, because you'll remember that was what it was mentioned that the float took, and some number 8s, which can act as smaller shot to allow us to get that amount of bristle we've got stuck out the water just right. Hooks are rated in sizes. A 24 hook is really small, up to say a size 2 hook is really, really big. So the bigger the number, the smaller the hook. The typical range we use for float fishing might range from say a size 12, which you might use for big baits like worms, up to around about a size 22, which you might use with small baits like pinkies. Obviously other hooks can be used for specialist purposes, but generally they're the only ones you're going to need. And I can find that down even more for you. For summer, autumn, springtime float fishing, a size 18 or 16 hook is perfect for targeting the majority of species. In terms of what you go for, I'd look no further than the pre-tied hooks that are available in many of our tackle shops. Today, we've gone for the Kamasan B911s, and these are just a straight hook with no band on these, so that baits like maggots and casters can be hooked straight on to the shank. The next thing, when I talked about line, I mentioned breaking strain, and exactly the same thing applies to the hook lengths. So these are tied to 2 pound 12 ounce line. Key point here, make sure your hook length is slightly lighter than your main line. So in the unlikely event that you snag up on the bottom or your hook Moby Dick, at least your hook length's going to break before your main line. So it saves having to replace the whole setup, only your hook length breaks. And the second kind of hook I've bought is a Drennan Carp Bandit. This is the same as the Kamasan B911, except it comes with a band already tied onto the bottom of the hook. So when you're mounting hard baits like pellets or wanting to hair rig baits like meat, that proves very, very useful. Finally, I just want to run through a few little accessories that you'll find very useful on the bankside. First off is one of these. Ask in your local tackle shop for a plummet. It's basically a weight with a hole in the top for your line to go through and some soft foam in the bottom for your hook to attach onto. And this is used to find the correct depth of water to fish in. So you can use this to accurately measure the depth of the lake in front of you. Second up, scissors. Small point, but a good pair of sharp scissors is essential for trimming line down when you're on the bank getting set up. And finally, the schoolboy's favourite, the catapult. These are very, very good for firing bait out to the range that you want to fish at if it's further than you can throw bait. So I'd say for the beginner, it's well worth investing in a catapult. Two more essentials that you must take for the purposes of fish welfare are a landing net and landing net handle. Now you can buy both relatively cheaply from your local shop, and all you'll find is a screw thread on the end of the landing net which screws into the handle. If you should be lucky enough to hook a big fish, you can easily land it with this without having to wade into the water or try and pull it up the bank. And also it allows you to look after the fish a little bit better when you get it on the bank side, so it's not flapping about on the bank and in the mud.